It's showtime.
Go. Head on with Bob Kincaid. 3 hours of conversation, cussin' and a discussin' with America's only born and bred Southern liberal talk host. Head on with Bob Kincaid is brought to you each night by Coal River Mountain Watch. Coal River Mountain Watch invites you to become part of the solution, part of a sustainable future, part of the uprising against mountaintop removal. Coal River Mountain Watch, crmw.net. And now, from high in the hills of beautiful West Bicod, Virginia, here's Bob Kincaid on the Head On Radio Network.
Well, howdy. Alrighty, we are up and running and ready to go and roaring out of the gate. By Jove, this is a live program. This is the Horn. Headon.live is where we live until we get HeadOnRadioNetwork.com rebuilt. And then we'll still be at Headon.live because it's a really cool place, Headon.live. That, of course, is where you go if you would like to, for instance, jump into the chat room and participate in the merry, madcap, rollicking, wacky, zany, multimedia good time that is the chat room during the hours in which this program is live from 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, but which is 6 to 8 p.m. this week because I'm doing double duty by filling in over at the Mike Malloy program. So live from 6 to 8 this evening, and if you pick yourself out a screen name and a password, and if you set up an exception within your security settings and ignore the oh my God, your computer's going to melt into a steaming heap of slag warning because add-on chat won't update their security certificate, but things are otherwise fine, and you pop into the chat room, you'll be greeted by Anatole and Squeaky and midweek pinch hit utility chat room moderator and all-around great guy, Steve from Georgia Stan, and of course I'm in there too, and more people may be wandering by even yet. In fact, right now, there's VT Blom popping in. So, see how it works? Yeah. Hi, I'm Bob Kincaid. We're at midweek on this first full week of April, and I'm trusting that audio is getting out. Here, let me... I see levels, and I see sending, and I see... Yeah, okay, so... hopefully everything is wonderful, both at headon.live and at the White Rose Society stream, which would mean that we're live right now at, where all? White Rose Society, headon.live, FYI Nation, TuneIn, Stitcher, Roku, goodness me, we are all over the place. Okay, thank you. Finally, from Steve from Georgia Stan, loud and clear. Much obliged. And from Scott and Punky, loud and clear. Sound is working, says Lee. Thank you, one and all. Okay, so that's a relief. It's always nice when things work when you just start the program. Now, of course, the first thing we do in every program is I thank, but I do so on behalf of the entire community, our subscribers. Yes. And on this, the fourth day of the month, we have 2 subscribers. One of them is Paul. Thank you, Paul. And the other is Catherine. in California, thanks to both of you very kindly. And your ongoing support of the program, of course, makes you partial sponsors of this evening's program. So thank you. Thank you very, very much indeed. And remember, program note, I keep announcing this, and I've been announcing it for a week now, which means that come next Monday, I'm going to get a bunch of emails from people saying, Bob, where are you? You didn't say you were going to be gone this week, which is not true. Every night this week, and I started doing it last week too. I will not be here next week. I'm going to Washington, D.C. to do some work related to the Appalachian Communities Health Emergency Campaign. Hopefully take some further steps in addressing the ongoing human rights and human health crisis in this state. And I'm tweaking audio. See, I have to change settings when there are settings changes that take place when I sub for Malloy, and it becomes a matter of kind of trying to keep track of exactly where those are relative to night baseball. But you get the idea. So anyway, I'll be gone next week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Assuming that I can get up and get out of D.C. By like 10 in the morning and don't have tons and tons and tons of traffic hang-ups and bullshit and stuff like that. I'll be home in time for Friday on the Front Porch, and hopefully we'll have Friday on the Front Porch this week as well. I will not be filling in for Malloy on Friday, so there's that too. So anyway, that means that the goal this week has been to do the fundraising for this week and next week all at once. I know it's a pain in the ass, and I apologize for it. Hell, I apologize for the fact that I'm not independently wealthy and printing my own money and just running this program for the sheer joy of it and never counting the cost. But I'm not independently wealthy. That was a long time ago. And well, that wasn't a long time ago. That was like never. But anyway, that's where we find ourselves. And I caught myself in an error. I don't have to burn myself at the stake or anything. It's Wednesday, prayer meeting and everything, but I caught myself in an error. And that error was I failed to take into account the fact that Tom last week made a challenge, and it was immediately met, and it would have been a challenge that was put forward last night, but it was immediately met. So where we would have been, the way I was looking at it, we were at like 750 to fundraise for this evening, but no, it's actually 550, and that's where things stand. So thank you very kindly to Tom, and I'm trying to remember who it was that responded to Tom, and that's a long time ago, Friday. But I probably need to figure out a way to say thank you again. Let's see, so Friday would be, and that's on the 30th. Yeah, the 30th. No, come on. Ah, yes. It was Joan. It was Joan who responded to Tom's challenge. So, thanks to Joan and thanks to Tom. Anyway, what was a $750 is actually is a $550 fundraising goal, and we can start the program this evening with a $50 challenge, courtesy of Dr. John. I heard from Dr. John earlier today, so we've got a $50 challenge to get things going, and if we can knock down if we can knock down $500, we're that much closer to having the fundraising done for the whole week. And that means I get to leave and go to D.C. and not be half freaked out and waiting for a phone call to come from Agnes going, why ain't the lights on? No, she doesn't talk like that. So if you want to help out, the PayPal button is at headon.live. And if you'd like to become a subscriber and join Catherine and Paul on this 4th day of the month, then that is also, there's a little box there. Just check it, put in $10, and you'll be putting out something like less than the cost of a half of a McDonald's hamburger to keep independent, non-commercial, non-capitalist, progressive, liberal broadcasting afloat. Yeah, half the cost of a McDonald's hamburger. And I don't know, I like this better than a McDonald's hamburger, but I'm funny that way. So that's where we stand. If you'd like to be part of the Patreon campaign, the Patreon link is also at headon.live, and it'll take you over, and you can set yourself up a subscription there. The same thing obtains half the price of a McDonald's hamburger. Gets you, let's see, how many? God, something like 60 or sometimes in excess of 60 hours of broadcasting per month. Yeah. So I if I heard that, I'd be like, wow, I'm going to go do that. But, we've got a lot more listeners than we have contributors. Bottom line. So that having been said, there is a $50 challenge on the table. We get that taken care of. That'll take us down to $450 to go, and we'll be in a lot better shape than we are right now. Okay? Oh, let's see. Let me check here. That's funny. Albert in Rhode Island writes, do you believe that Dope 45's supporters would donate money to build his wall? I think the idea of putting up a GoFundMe campaign to build the stupid wall would be a great, hilarious idea, and it would let the sane, intelligent people off the hook too, because we're not stupid enough to. But they'd have to raise a lot more money than what's actually being put forward as the cost of the wall, because as I mentioned the other night, and it may be on this program or on Malloy's, it kind of runs together, in my mind at least. There is still litigation going on over dim leaders' fence. No kidding, it's still ongoing. This, and I had to run out to the store for a minute, errands and everything. It's going to get down to like 25 tonight because it's spring. So I had to run out and get a jug of kerosene. And on the way back in, I heard them talking on National Petroleum Radio about, the wall. And it occurred to me, and of course these are, highfalutin professional they're in PR, they're not for-profit media, but highfalutin professional radio broadcast journalists. You can't talk to them like that or anything, but I was struck by this notion that it would be really nice if we could just give up the pretense and put the word stupid in front of every reference to the Great Wall o' Trump. Trump's stupid wall. The stupid border wall. Because there's nothing even remotely... It's stupid. And nobody in their right mind thinks it'll do anything. Especially if it's got windows in it where you can see the people heaving the bales of the marijuanas over the... Oh, my God. But now the national... I'm getting ahead of myself here. See what you people do? I had plans. First thing I wanted to do, hold on. It's prayer meeting Wednesday. Here, let's just deal with this with some semblance of sanity and or order. It's prayer meeting Wednesday. Ordinarily on prayer meeting Wednesday, there's a lot of carrying on and the shtick that goes on and everything. But we're not going to. This is a sad and a grim day, because of course this is the 50th anniversary of the martyrdom of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I don't even like that word, martyr. And once again, as seems to be the case with all of the assassinations from the 1960s, no one's entirely satisfied with the answers that we were given for how and why this murder came to be. The King family seems pretty well convinced that James Earl Ray didn't act alone. James Earl Ray later said he didn't act alone. He said he was hired by some mob guy named Raoul. Oh, really, Raoul. And that he bought the rifle and he took it to Raoul and yada, yada, yada. And there are other, and I'm not trying to be flippant about it. But this country took another blow that it could ill sustain 50 years ago today. But I don't want to be a hypocrite about this, because the fact of the matter is I was 5 years old when it happened. My memories are almost non-existent. The one thing I remember about the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered is, let's remember, everybody, I was raised in Alabama, okay? A neighbor up the street laughing and hollering because that had finally been killed. That's my memory of 50 years ago today. I'm of a different generation. And I knew at the age of 5 that there was something awful, because if nothing else, I knew that word, I had been taught from the very beginning that word was awful. And so when I heard it emanate from the mouth of one of my little buddies, I knew, yeah, it was awful. It was also it's also Maya Angelou's birthday. And for years, Maya Angelou refused to celebrate her own birthday because of the grief that attended this particular day. Of course, there was grief and violence in the aftermath. One of the most iconic moments is Bobby Kennedy telling a crowd what had happened. There was civil unrest. I hesitate to use the word riots. We only haul out the word riot when it's something that the power structure doesn't approve of. But it also marks the end of something. It put a big dot at the on the nonviolence movement. And we are the worse for it. And there was really no one to step into the power vacuum for, even though he espoused nonviolence, there was power. Dr. King exercised power. And there was no one who was really capable of stepping into his shoes. John Lewis, Andrew Jackson, John Lewis, Jesse Jackson. Where did I? Andrew Young, all went on to storied careers in their own right, but the efforts that Dr. King was leading at the time, a lot of it went by the wayside. And his words, but his words stayed behind, and they remain relevant to this day. I think about it now. Now, bear in mind, this is a unique anniversary because it's 50. It's a half a century. It's a nice round number that's a multiple of 10, and we have those sort of artificial human obsessions with those sorts of numbers. When in fact, there's no such thing as an anniversary. There's no day that is exactly like unto the day that happened, whether it's a year, 10 or 50 or 100 before, because the planet is forever moving through space. But because of the way we reckon the calendar, we come around to days like this and we say, aha, today we remember. But even so, and this is one of those things, the reason the King family never felt particularly good about the investigation of the murder of Dr. King is because it was led by the FBI. And while I just said that that every day is different and unlike any other, and that no day is identical to another, isn't it fascinating that 50 years ago there were questions? And of course, James Earl Ray was not caught immediately. He'd go on the lam and only be busted at London's Heathrow Airport considerably later. There was never a trial. Nobody shot him the way that Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald, but he entered a guilty plea so as to avoid the death penalty, and therefore there was never within the context of a criminal trial, there was never a full accounting for the evidence. And so it is that here it is, 2018, and we've got another 9 years to wait before the entire file on the King assassination is released to the American public. Much as was the case with the Kennedy files, and I'm sure they'll be significantly redacted even when that happens. But the question, before we go into the body of the news, the question is that of the world that he left behind. Because, he said that white America had written a check to black people in this country on which, in an account for which there were insufficient funds to cash it. And that was true then, and it is true now. Now, I'm sure that again, as we note on the annual holiday, the only thing that white wingers, right wingers, Republicans, libertarians, what have you, the only thing they ever know about Dr. King is that he once said that we have to judge a person based upon the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And that's the sum total of everything there is to know about anything that Dr. King ever said. As if you're a white Republican out there somewhere. But he said ever so much more. And he delivered withering critiques of the American economic system. And he also absolutely blistered a warmongering government. Anybody who wants to can go and find the Beyond Vietnam speech. And those were the things that got him dead. And that's one of the things that makes the James Earl Ray story more than just a little bit suspicious. Because James Earl Ray just really didn't much. I mean, he wasn't ardently involved in following the arc of the life of Dr. King. There's not as much connective tissue with James Earl Ray as there is with Lee Harvey Oswald, and certainly not as there is with John Wilkes Booth. And of course, it is the assassination of Dr. King is of a piece with the whole history, the long history of failings in this country that begins with our original sins, genocide, and slavery. A note coming in from Ron in Raleigh. Subject line, did I miss something? Did President Creamsicle say a mumbling word about the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination? Not worth mentioning, I guess. There have been the assassination anniversary stories coming across my feed all day long. And I have yet to see where he said a word. And I was wondering the same thing, Ron. Although I'm sure maybe in some non-camera, non-microphone, nobody to leak on it moment, if what we're told about the outtakes or the raw footage from The Apprentice is true, I'm sure he said that very, very awful special word a couple of times, at least, today, because he uses it a lot. Maybe this is another good day to remember also that the President of the United States' father was a member of the Klan. And that, too, is a measure, a quantifier of the distance we have traveled either forward or backward in the 50-year interval which we're discussing at this moment. There was, for instance, and I suspect the timing was not accidental, there was a study released today as a function of a directive from the General Accountability Office, which used to be called the General Accounting Office. That name was Orwellized back during the Reign of Error. But it examined the punishment rates for children of color in America's public schools. And part of the reason for this is that back during the Obama administration, the Obama administration had crafted guidance which said that the disproportionate punishment of children of color in public schools would be deemed to be grounds for the federal government to step in and sue school districts, that it would be legally actionable. and that measures might be taken in court to correct such obvious disparate outcomes. Well, we now have a Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, sister of a warmonger, Eric Prince, whose entire goal in life, and of course she doesn't have much in the way of an education, and she knows nothing about education, no experience with which to fill her cabinet-level office as Secretary of Education. Betsy DeVos would like to get rid of that Obama-era guidance regarding disparate discipline of African-American children in public schools. Well, this report came out today, and it is abundantly clear that there is a real problem in this country in the public school system that cannot be explained away as anything but a function of race, because God knows the attempts to explain it away have been made. It is the first national analysis of disparity in school discipline since the guidance issued in 2014 by the Obama administration. Under the new analysis, 15.5% of all public school students are black children. However, 39% of students suspended from school are black children. People have tried to argue, well, poor schools versus wealthier school districts. No, because this report it got granular on that kind of stuff. The numbers, you see the same kind of numbers in wealthy school districts as you do poor school districts. And among other things, of course, no good white winger will let a crisis go without trying to find some racist angle to it. The Obama guidance of 2014 has been cited as the reason that Nicholas Cruz was allowed to stay in school, which somehow or another made it more likely that he would commit the Valentine's Day massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. I can't sort out that line of non-reasoning because I can't always think like, one of these booger-eating maggots. The Obama-era guidance was called Rethink School Discipline. And now the white wing is clamoring that it, like anything else that had anything to do with Barack Obama's administration, must be subjected to damnatio memoriae and disappeared down the memory hole. Representative Bobby Scott of Virginia said, the analysis shows that students of color suffer harsher discipline for lesser offenses than their white peers and that racial bias is a driver of discipline disparities. This report underscores the need to combat these gross disparities by strengthening, not rescinding, the 2014 discipline guidance package, which recommends specific strategies to reduce the disparities without jeopardizing school safety. Through all of this, Betsy DeVos remained enigmatically silent, but I think we know where she wants to go with this. Because if we can get back to, if we can up the ante on discipline issues, then she can argue that, as the maggots do, that public education is what we need to do. You need to sell the school system to some corporations. Brought to you by Carl's Jr. Right? And so it is a measure of the distance traveled or not in 50 years that this is that big a problem 50 years later. But there are more personal aspects to that to the question of the distance traveled than simply something like school discipline statistics. Take, for instance, something that happened in Florida. At Florida Atlantic University, there's a professor. I had so much gin on my salad before I got started this evening. There's a professor at Florida Atlantic University by the name of Marshall DeRosa. Professor DeRosa is a big fan of the Confederacy. Professor DeRosa is a former member of what is described as the educational arm of a group of white nationalists, white supremacists, racists. Yeah. And he was called out at a faculty meeting at Florida Atlantic University for the positions that he has espoused. He created this concept called Confederate case law. And Confederate case law, he claims, shows that black supremacy was a driving factor in the rise of slavery, and that argument was published by a group called the Abbeville Institute, which in turn is named after the birthplace of John C. Calhoun, vicious South Carolina slaver. Writing in the Abbeville Institute, Professor DeRosa said, "The tar baby in any defense." No, really, he said tar baby. "The tar baby in any defense of the Confederacy is slavery, which has segued into white supremacy. That issue will be addressed in subsequent Confederate case law. But for now, suffice it to say that linking the two, slavery with white supremacy, is a gross oversimplification. First, black supremacy is the origin of Southern slavery." No, and see, he knew what he was doing when he used the term tar baby. Tar baby itself is a complicated little phrase that arises out of English. Of the Southern literary tradition. It comes from the Uncle Remus tales of Joel Chandler Harris, and in its earliest incarnations in that literature was not simply referred to as tar baby, but with that particular word that has an N, two G's, an R, an E, and an I, and isn't ginger appended in front of it. Yes. He is an apologist, and why? I mean, I understand. Okay, historians play the what if game, and we all play the what if game. On a day like today, we ask ourselves, what if Dr. King had not been murdered? What if he had gone on and taken the civil rights struggle into the direction that he appeared to be going into a struggle against poverty and an attempt to link up poor whites and poor blacks together and march forward in a demand for not just racial justice, but economic and social justice, which we're still talking about today? What would have happened? And it's a fascinating discussion, but it's one that it's a parlor trick. It's something you do in a wood-paneled room with the smell of cigar smoke and, probably, I don't know, and, bourbon and men wearing corduroy sport coats with leather elbow patches. And it's masturbatory in nature. It's just purely a matter of self-gratification. And so one wonders, though, why someone who considers himself a professional academic, why does that person engage in this backward-looking apologia for the single greatest horror? Well, okay, you gotta put the native genocide and slavery sort of neck and neck on single greatest horror. It's not a competition. They are our original sins. But what's the point, apart from simply trying to inflame racist tendencies among disaffected, dyspeptic white people? What's the point? But there he was in the Florida Atlantic University faculty meeting, saying, I don't really care what y'all think of me. But then he climbed up on the cross and started nailing away and said, you put my family at risk. The professor accused the students who had come to challenge him of being peddlers of untruths and smears. And then, in a fit of raging paranoia, turning to his fellow faculty members and saying, you all have weaponized these here students to attack me. And they're going to be rooted out. The one young African-American man who challenged him, the first thing the white professor did was say, you a student here? Uh-huh. You a graduate student? Yeah, here at Florida Atlantic? Yeah. Are you? What's your name? Presumably in an attempt to intimidate him into silence by having his graduate work or ability to complete his graduate work threatened. It is unfair to say that this is somehow the measure. It is not the measure of Dr. King's work, but it is certainly measure of the work that this country has apparently proven itself either unwilling or incapable of doing. There's also the fact that, and this is just a little reminder, that there's litigation going on now from something that happened a couple of years ago. A guy at a Dave Chappelle show flung a banana peel at him, and of course claims, well, that wasn't racist nor nothing. I just had a banana peel handy, and he'd insulted my friend. You know, if you've got really tender fifis, you might want to not go to a Dave Chappelle performance and, heckle Dave Chappelle. But more than anything else, because it gets a little play on this program from time to time. Maybe the barometer was to be found early this morning, because, that's when the cranky old white people are up and about and active. The calls to C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Oh God, if Todd's listening, or maybe Steve from Georgia Stan, they're going, yes, I was there, I heard it, it was crazy. So they opened up the phone lines. For people to talk about the legacy of Dr. King. And some people said nice things. There was a white lady who called in from Arkansas who said, we aren't focusing enough on the death of John Kennedy, which didn't happen on the comment. Magnolia, Arkansas was where she was calling from. And she said, and I will tell you, here in Magnolia, the black people are more prejudiced against whites than we are against them. Oh, never mind. Let's go to the tail of the tape.
Wall Street Journal this morning, authored by Jason Riley. Let's go to Anita. Anita at Magnolia, Arkansas.
Yes,
hello.
By all means.
Hi, good morning, Pedro.
Pedro.
I am old enough to remember when Dr. King was killed. I'm white, but I know black people here in my hometown who are my age who actually cried over that. The same as we did when John Kennedy was assassinated. And I do wish that the media would pay some attention to the John Kennedy assassination. We've heard absolutely almost nothing about that latest report that came out a few months ago. And at age 15, I thought that I would never know who killed John Kennedy.
Well, we're focused on Martin Luther. We're focused on Martin Luther King today. What do you think his legacy was?
I think his legacy was that people need to try to work together and to get along.
Wow, she missed the boat, didn't she? Yeah, that was the message of Dr. Martin Luther King. People need to work together and get along. Get along, eh? Get along. No, get along. Get on. If you don't need to be eating at this lunch counter, get along. You need to get along. And no matters of equality or the right to vote or meaningfully participate in the civic governance of the country. No, Nita in Magnolia, she just wants them. We just need to work together and try to get along. But she wasn't done. Oh, no.
And I will tell you, here in Magnolia, the black people are more prejudiced against whites than we are against them.
Let's go to Huntsville, Alabama.
Oh, let's
Fred is next. Fred, good morning. You're on.
Good morning. I'd like to say something very, very short and very special. The King was one of a kind. No one will ever replace him, ever. He was a heck of a man, and may he rest in peace. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Trenton, New Jersey. We divided the lines differently. Those of you over 50, those of you between 30 and 50, those of you under 30. So pick one of those lines, and if you have not called in the last 30 days, give us a call. Patrick is in Trenton in that category between 30 and 50. Patrick, go ahead.
Pedro, morning. Good morning. On this very special day. King's legacy, I don't know what town you grew up in, but I live in Trenton, New Jersey. The blacks burned the town down after he was killed. So this idea of that King was a man of peace and gentle and wanting just to do things the peaceful way, our town got burned down. What you do is when you raise one group up, the blacks, so-called civil rights, you're taking privileges away from another group. So, and that was a great article you read, Pedro, by the Wall Street Journal there. That was I pretty much agree with that. And today's real meaning in this day, you have to look at it. It's James Earl Ray, the lone wolf assassin. He had a dream, and James Earl Ray's dream came true.
Yeah. Well, now. See, so far, just keeping track, that's one old racist from Arkansas, one young racist from New Jersey, and a decent human being from Huntsville, Alabama.
We'll go to Robert, Florence, Kentucky, in the ages of 30 and 50.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on some of the facts about Martin Luther King that aren't going to be shared by the news media today.
Oh boy, get the hockey puck.
As long as the people who control the news media have control of it, the fact that he's a doctor, known as a doctor, his doctorate was actually plagiarized. The work that he was actually recognized by the Boston University as being plagiarized. They said there was no point in taking his doctorate away, but he actually is known as a plagiarist for also stealing the I Have a Dream speech from another black pastor. He also known as a communist agitator. That's his legacy, seen as in the front of the Highlander Folk School, which was a well-known communist front, and also being a philanderer. There's a reason why the FBI, a judge, a pro-King judge, sealed the FBI's files on Dr. King or should I say Michael King, which is actually his real name. He actually didn't have his real name even legally changed. The fact that he was...
I think we may be hearing from zombie J. Edgar Hoover there, because he's repeating every talking point that Hoover pretty much approved in the time that he was trying to slime Dr. King.
Bugged in that hotel the night before. There's a reason why the judge sealed the files, because he was beating up on prostitutes, which he routinely saw. This was known.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Sylvia, Fort Worth, Texas.
See, that's your liberal media. That's your liberal media right there. They won't let the truth come out about old Michael King. See, he wasn't really a doctor. Jesus Christ. And I kind of knew, I mean, I'll be honest, I kind of wish we were just doing the regular prayer meeting Wednesday shtick this evening. Because, well, you know me, I'm a little ray of sunshine. And I mean, this is just kind of weird. This is personal. I was born on the 98th, because here we are with the anniversaries again. Or, as Lee in New York explains to me, in Judaism, the deceased are remembered in the time of year that they died, and the term is Yahrzeit, Y-A-H-R-Z-E-I-T, Yahrzeit, which is, well, I presume that's Yiddish, but it's cognate with the German year time, Yahrzeit. But I was born on the 98th anniversary of the passage in the House of Representatives of the 13th Amendment. Just one of those little, happenstances. And from the moment of the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the present, there has remained an undercurrent in this country, and it would be both unfair and wrong to entirely place that burden on southern states. You'll notice that the guy in Trenton there, that New Jersey didn't secede from the Union. But there was tremendous southern, well, maybe not tremendous, but there was a considerable degree of sympathy for the South in the in areas of the mercantile North where they depended upon the raw materials produced by the South in order to continue getting richer and richer and richer and richer, doing things like trading on Wall Street. And every effort to go forward on issues of, for what is, for want of a better term, called race, has been met with at least 2 or 3 steps backwards. The history of the Supreme Court of the United States, for instance, from 1865 to the present, is consistently a matter of the Supreme Court getting more cases wrong than they got right. And I suppose you can probably extend that backwards to 1848 and the Dred Scott decision. And all over this country, it's a matter of getting things more wrong than right. Because instances where corrective action, which might have been painful, could have been taken, it wasn't. Consider that we are talking now, right now, this day, about Donald Trump wanting to put troops along the Mexican border because he's shit his pants over Fox News reports of a caravan of tormented people moving northward from Central America through Mexico and toward the American border. Now what the shitheads on a sofa in the morning at Fox didn't explain to Geezer Disgustus is that is an annual event. It just happens to have gotten really big this year. It's an annual event done to highlight the crisis that continues to this day, largely as a result of the meddling and connivance of the United States of America that makes people's lives intolerable there. And so Trump wants to put troops on the border, and yet to do that with the actual standing United States Army would be a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, which was passed into law in 1879 as a means of getting the occupying Union forces out of the South, Reconstruction, so that the South could get back to the business at hand of abusing, suppressing, repressing, and oppressing freed slaves in order to maintain an entirely corrupt, filthy, vulgar, hateful, bloody social order. Now, Trump is going to get around this, apparently, by sending the National Guard to the border, and they're not going to be allowed to have any contact with immigrants, so mostly they're just going to sit there and cost money and not do anything, except serve as a public relations backdrop for a petty, vindictive, poorly educated, hateful racist who happens to be president of the United States. And of course, the Posse Comitatus business, the original passage of it, stems from an agreement that was reached to resolve a screwed up presidential election in which the guy who won the popular vote, wait for it, didn't get to be president. But the election was thrown to the House, and the House struck a deal whereby Southerners would support the guy who didn't win in exchange for a promise to end Reconstruction so they could get back to the business of lynching people. This is part of the reason that it is often argued that the South lost the war but won the terrorist insurgency that followed in the wake of the Civil War. And finally, just to put, let me check in some email here. Matt in San Francisco says, subject line, ignorant callers. I've always wondered how these ignorant racist callers have figured out how to use their fingers to dial a phone. I would think it's a great challenge with one finger in your nose and the thumb up your ass. Well, that's true, and that's what that's what their pointy little noses are for. Thank you, Matt. Subject line, MLK and C-SPAN. Bill in Allentown says, I usually watch C-SPAN in the morning. Didn't catch the hockey puck section of the show today. These people need to go back to school. Even some of their teachers need to go back to school. There are many sympathizers of the South up here, even in Pennsylvania, Stan. Oh, not even in, Bill. No offense. Especially in. Philly in the east, Pittsburgh in the west, Alabama in the middle. So now, just to put a little bow on it all, a little something closer to home. A reminder about the governor of the state of West Virginia. You know him. Members of this community are probably more conversant with who the governor of West Virginia is than listeners to almost any other radio program, because we talk about him more often, and I'm talking about Jim Kincaid Justice. We call him Kincaid Justice because of the story that he likes to tell wherever he goes about the day that he figured out why it is he's so gosh darned rich. The story goes like this. You know, I'm real rich. And I was asking God one night, I said, God, how come it is that I am so rich? And God says to me, Jim Justice, I made you Jim Justice and not Kunta Kinte for a reason. 'Cause I want you to do good with all that money I done give you. And that's why you're Jim Justice and not Kunta Kinte. You know, the fictionalized ancestor of Alex Haley from the book and miniseries Roots. Yeah. Well, Jim Justice is an older American. And Jim's quite convinced that he hasn't a racist bone in his body. And that may be true if you consider that you separating the racist bones from the racist body becomes both an act of futility and a waste of time. But he's not just a racist in regard to people of African extraction. He's a racist as compared to people from what we refer to as the Far East or Asia. I mentioned to you a couple of months back during the debate about teacher salaries in West Virginia that in Lewisburg, West Virginia, he said there wasn't a Chinaman's chance that taxes would be raised on the fracking industry in order to pay for badly needed raises for teachers and other service personnel in the school systems and state workers in general. Not a Chinaman's chance in the whole wide world that'll happen. It's not getting out of committee. 2 days later, when he was called on it, he said, well, I use a lot of silly phrases and stuff like that. If that offended somebody, then I'm sorry. You know, the classic Republican non-apology apology. If that offended somebody. Yeah, right, yeah. Oh, Brother Deacon Asa letting me know. By the way, Shitheads on the Sofa is also the name of the Mar-a-Lago house band. Yeah, a little cowbell for Brother Deacon Asa. So, having used that slur against Asian people, And if that offended somebody, I'm sorry. Well, I mean, I'm white. I'm probably whiter than Jim Justice. I burn under the refrigerator bulb, let's remember. And I was offended by that. Because I'm offended by the idea that my state has a racist for a governor. So I guess Jim Justice sort of apologized to me. But the thing is, it persists. Jim Justice appointed a guy named Dave Perry, who used to work in the school system here in Fayette County, to be vice president of the state school board. In a telephone interview, he was asked a question to which he did not know the answer. Now, let's review for a moment here. If you don't know the answer to a question and somebody asks you, it's traditional to say, I don't know. Or if you're feeling a little bit froggy about it, you'll say, I'll have to get back to you on that. Neither of these were the answers that were given by West Virginia Board of Education Vice President Dave Perry. No, he said, I don't have a Chinaman's knowledge about that. Don't have a Chinaman's knowledge. Because, see, there's an old and ugly streak of anti-Asian racism in this country, too. There are other phrases that go with it, some of which I heard, and quite possibly have even used, and stopped using once I realized, yeah, that's a pretty bigoted statement. But to say one does not have a Chinaman's chance refers directly to the anti-Asian bigotry of laws passed in and by this country with regard to the entry of Asian people into this country. I don't have a Chinaman's knowledge, Dave Perry said. Of course, later he was asked, what a question this is. Did you, Mr. State Board of Education Vice President Perry, did you mean to use that as a racist term? Why, heavens to Betsy, no! I didn't mean to use that as a racist term. I'm just, I'm 66 years old, and I've heard a lot of language over the years, and sometimes I just use some colorful language. I have no idea other than just through my 66 years I've heard it used down through the years. Huh, how about that? I'll bet he's heard another word used down through the years and somehow managed not to use that. Or maybe he does and we just don't know it. But there are hurtful phrases out there. For instance, and I know I've been guilty of this one, and I have tried to remove it from my vocabulary. At the State School Building Authority meeting in this past November, old Dave Perry, who's 66 years old and has just heard a bunch of language and just uses words down through the years. In explaining that he understood the nature of a question, he said, I got you. I didn't ride the short bus. I rode the regular bus. He then said that didn't have anything to do with special needs kids at all. And it wasn't a reference to special ed children. Of course not. Yeah. On the other hand, if you go and you look it up in the dictionary, you'll find that Merriam-Webster does define Chinaman's anything as often deemed to be a statement of prejudice and bigotry. Yeah. I know. Yeah, Michael in Madison says, time out. I've heard Chinaman's chants a million times growing up, but Chinaman's knowledge, is that even a thing? I was kind of the same way. It's just, I guess you take anything that's an impossibility, and in the world of David Perry, you throw, or, Jim Kunta Kinte Justice, you throw Chinaman in front of it, because people frown on you if you use that other word. Besides, we ain't got a bunch of, no, I mean, we got a long way to go. We got a very long way to go. But the problem is not the measurement of the distance, but the willingness to make the journey. The willingness to try to continue to learn. And the willingness when you're caught in something to say, I'm sorry, not I'm sorry if I offended you. Is Jim Kunta Kinte Justice going to get to the pearly gates on the great getting up morning, since it's Wednesday and all? And is he going to stand there before St. Peter reading through the book, the Lamb's Book of Life, and he said, yep, I got you right here. Oh my goodness, you did that day? Oh, Jim. And he's going to say, well, I'm sorry if that offended you, St. Peter, or the Almighty. No, with the flames of hell a licking at his tender hide, he's going to say, I'm sorry, forgive me, Jesus. Right. Subject line, is it really a racial slur, coming from Ron in Raleigh? I had always thought a Chinaman's chance was in reference to the immigration laws of the time. But Ron says, my understanding of the phrase a Chinaman's chance has to do with when Chinese railroad workers were used to set explosives on hillsides to blast tunnels while suspended in baskets. They had little chance of being pulled up and out of danger before the charges went off. Wow. Just wow. So, there we are at the close of the filibuster. And we'll take a break, see if anybody wants to engage in some conversation. New callers are always welcome here. We enjoy them. If you've never called the program before, you probably will not faint or get the fan tods or apoplexy or anything like that just by talking. You know how to reach the program, I trust. Area code 304-574-8178. Toll free from, if you need us to pay the freight, 844-843-4676, 844-THE-HORN. And Skype to Skype, Bob Kincaid Horn, from anywhere on the planet that'll let you get out from behind their firewall. And I've got thanks to send out because Dr. John's challenge has been met. Thank you very kindly to Samson, whose message says, the percentage that Rebecca Dallett won by, 56%. nice reference to the whooping that Scott Walker and his Republican Party took in a Supreme Court race in Wisconsin yesterday. The Wisconsinites turned out bigly. The good ones did, that is. The maggots, apparently, stayed home or were overwhelmed. And so, consequently, there is one less right-wing ass on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Thank you, Samson. That percentage also knocks down Dr. John's challenge, which means that we have $494 to go in fundraising this evening. $494, and hopefully we'll knock down some more of that so that, at the very least, maybe we're keeping up with ordinary fundraising, and we'll just have a week-long fundraising deficit at the end of April. Okay? Okay. So let's take a break and see what happens on the other side. This is listener-supported conversation radio. This is The Horn. I'm Bob Kincaid. Would have been easy to go with the YouTube bumper, but everybody else has run that today, I imagine.
See a mountain peak off in the distance. See a billion roads leading there. The higher each road goes, the closer they all come, till they all come together. And they're all one, but everybody got a wall. Everybody's got to walk. No, there ain't no free ride. Everybody's got to walk. Yeah. You might have angel wings. You might be tied to a wheelchair. Maybe a jet plane pilot. You might be nothing but thin air. You might be a Muslim. You might be Hindu. You might be Christian. Might be a Jew. But everybody's got to walk. Everybody gotta walk. Ain't no free ride. Everybody's gotta walk.
20 minutes past the hour. A couple of notes coming in along the way. Steve in New York, a member of the fraternity of Steve, says, subject line, Jim Justice. I can hear St. Peter now. Sorry, Mr. Justice. Wait, is that really your name? How ironical. Best I can give you, Mr. Justice, is 500,000 years in purgatory. Yeah, says Steve, the Catholics were right about that one. Oh, yeah. And Bill in Allentown says, if you're going to apologize to somebody, you say, I apologize for offending you, not I apologize if I offended you. Well, but that's how Republicans apologize, you see. Meanwhile, a trenchant observation from Renee up in D.C. If Justice is 66, and Dave Perry says he's 66, I don't know, maybe Justice is, maybe he's the same age as Geezer Disgustus. Maybe he's 71 or something. I don't know. But if Justice is 66, I'm calling BS on an age factor explaining his racism. This man would have been in his 20s in 1978 and knows exactly what he does when he makes with the dog whistles and the slurs. Yeah, and see, that's the thing. We're getting to the point where people of a certain age can no longer plead age as a function of their ignorance. Okay, Jim Justice's daddy? All right. Maybe he was roughly the same age as Fred Trump when, back in 1927, as a young racist, Fred Trump was getting arrested at a Klan riot in Jamaica, Queens. But that generation, the Robert Byrd generation, okay, and this is not me gooning on Robert Byrd, but the Robert Byrd generation that says, well, my mama always told me there was white and black. Even then, it was that was a pretty narrow call. I found it interesting that C-SPAN, in its Racists Call the Program segment that we had the clip from, split it out 50 and up, 30 to 50, and under 30. Because realistically speaking, I have, like I said, I have no working, I'm 55, and I have no working appreciation of Dr. King within the context of my actual life. Same goes for Bobby Kennedy. The same goes for, well, JFK. I think they're trying to define the boomers as 50 and up. And the more I study it, no, I'm pretty sure I'm probably not a boomer. My parents were Depression era. My parents were part of the, youth generation that fought World War II. But no, there's a pretty substantial. I think I'm at the front end of Generation X, and we can probably have a really, really highfalutin argument about that. Note coming in from Steve in Vermont. Subject line, on guns. I just can't stop thinking about guns lately. The kids woke me up. Steve from Vermont. Moneyed lobbies like the NRA try to dominate our lives with fear. The domineering violent spirit called the frontier spirit is the result of authoritarian upbringing. Punishment inflicted on you, and then you inflict punishment on others, undeserving poor. Shaming, one becomes a mere extension of the powerful father figure. You accept all of this, all of his views and beliefs, and echo all the hate and fear passed on down from generation to generation. Eventually, through greedy calculation, a culture of guns everywhere came to be. I recalled the great work by Richard Slotkin, Gunfighter Nation, the Myth of the American Frontier in 20th Century America. It was published in 1992. Mr. Slotkin implies a spiritual regeneration through violence, as acted out in the frontier myth, is a ubiquitous theme in other cultural histories as well, Germany, Yugoslavia, India, Pakistan. The authoritarian beliefs underlying these universal themes quickly take us to a dark and scary place. The thing is, though, while there is a mythology around it, I live in what I have been told was referred to at the time as the most dangerous place east of the Mississippi River in the early part of the 20th century. You can look at the archives of the photographic archives of this county where I live, and you can see pictures, and one of them's absolutely fascinating. It comes from an area around Glen Jean in Fayette County, West Virginia, and it's the patrons of a bar called Sam Ash's Saloon. I got real up close and personal with that with that particular photograph, just picking out little details of it one day. There is, for instance, a sign for a beer company hanging outside Sam Ash's Saloon for Buckeye Lager. I don't even know if Buckeye Lager still exists. It probably didn't survive Prohibition, because these photographs are all prior to 1913, when West Virginia jumped out ahead of the rest of the nation in enacting Prohibition, because, well, we were right drunk and violent around here back then, and they thought they'd curb the violence by curbing the drinking. But in this particular photograph, it's kind of just a long rectangular house kind of structure, but it's a saloon. It's probably also a bordello. But what jumps out at you immediately is the fact that it was an integrated saloon. Because there are black folks and white folks, not folks, men. There aren't any women. And there are guns everywhere. And, for instance, there's a black guy with a pistol pointing it down the line, and on the other end, there's a white guy drawing a pistol out of his jacket. There's another guy with a rifle or a shotgun hanging cradled in his arms. And Fayette County, West Virginia, was a murder capital. And in the run-up to Prohibition here, one of the arguments made by the temperance people was that we had to shut down the saloons because the saloon keepers were of such lax morals that they were letting blacks and whites drink together and go to the same whorehouses. And that this made Jesus sad. So I appreciate the note, Steve, and just thanks for tickling my memory on that particular issue. They're fascinating photos all over the place. Apparently, it was a thing back then to have a picture taken of you as though you were in a saloon shootout, a sort of gallows humor about just how dangerous this place was. And it was dangerous because life was cheap. And we're back to that place, again, thanks to the National Rifle Association, where life is cheap and getting cheaper. And a woman tried to shot up YouTube yesterday, because she was mad at YouTube because she thought that they were the source of her problems because they were putting age limits on who could watch her videos about Near East or Asian hand painting techniques. We have reports now that the woman had actually practiced at a gun range for a couple of weeks before she went to shoot up YouTube. If only she had had better training from the National Rifle Association, she might have actually killed somebody. not trying to be a smartass there. She wasn't nearly as talented with a firearm as your average good, God-fearing, upstanding, Bible-believing, Christ-centered, evangelical, fundamentalist, homosexual, white Christian mass shooter. Just saying. Let's run over and see what's on Scott's mind this evening. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Bob. I know we're doing an abbreviated program today, so I will be succinct, as it were. Your Punky update, I just want to tell you he is just nervously pacing up on top of his house because the Amazon man is bringing bird seed today. So he couldn't be happier. But
well, you
anyway.
know, I had a science story here, Scott.
Oh.
That said that some bird scientists think that birds may be able to actually see magnetic fields because of special proteins in their retinas. So it could be that birds can discern a disturbance in the force, and he may know the Amazon guy is on the way long before even the Amazon guy knows.
Huh. Nothing would surprise me about Punky the cockatiel. Nothing whatsoever.
Not in the least.
I wanted to chime in. Punky concurs. I wanted to chime in on a couple of things that you touched upon. I think the designation for baby boomers is 1946 to 1964. It's an Amazon lady. Imagine my surprise. Wait a minute.
We knew that. Yeah.
Hang on.
That's okay.
Punky?
Hi there.
Thank you. How you doing?
Good, and you?
Pretty well. My bird is happy. You brought him food.
Nice. You have a beautiful day.
Okay, you too.
Thank you.
Mercy. What a coinky-dink.
Yeah, that little chirp, I think, is abundantly obvious now that little chirp when I was talking about the bird story with the disturbance in the force, that was Punky chirping, busted.
Yeah, now they know. The worldwide audience. But anyway, baby boomers 46 to 64.
Yeah, that's I've always read that too, but there's also some overlap with Gen X.
Probably early. I don't know. All I know is I was born in 54, and it's been going steadily downhill ever since.
Yeah, you've got no argument. You're a freaking boomer. You're stuck with it.
Oh God. But and another thing, you were talking about Chinese insulting language. There was a rejected Viagra tagline that played on that. Viagra makes you harder than Chinese arithmetic.
Yeah, see, I'd heard that phrase as well, and because I sit around thinking about things, I came to the conclusion that's probably derogatory.
I think for the most part it is, because it underpins a stereotype that Asian folks are superior at their math skills.
Right, and the fact that the nature that of the writing system is such that who can tell who can tell what's a number?
Well, I think numbers are universal. I know the alphabet is different in Chinese, but I'm pretty sure.
I mean, you could just as easily say harder than long division with Roman numerals.
Well, yeah, but it is reality based in the sense that any math that an Asian or anybody is able to do up in the upper echelons of math studies is by its nature, for many of us, yourself included, more than difficult. It's throw up your hands and walk away.
Yeah, unapproachable. And then there's one that arises, I suspect, out of the Second World War. You're a bit of a history fan. Are you familiar with Claire Chennault? Or Chennault?
Yeah, Anna died the other day, his widow.
I'll be darned, I hadn't. Well, he led the Flying Tigers, right?
Yeah.
And these were an international cadre of pilots, fighter aircraft pilots, who were seconded to the Chinese army of Chiang Kai-shek in the Second World War to oppose the Japanese.
And I believe they predated our involvement in the war.
Yes.
They were sort of mercenaries.
Let's see. God is My Co-Pilot was one of the books that.
Yeah.
Well, there's a saying that came out of that era, and it was a statement of impossibility. For instance, let's see.
Trump will begin to talk sense when.
Or if Trump is a genius, I'm a Chinese aviator.
Okay. Because
there were no Chinese aviators, because there was no Chinese Air Force.
Right.
But there's bigotry tucked into all of that.
Yeah, because these sayings make an assumption that's based on nothing but a person's prejudice or being misinformed,
or based on the other's ethnicity.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I wanted to bring it back to Dr. King. That's the main reason I called. And I'll do it with a couple of things. First of all, a quote that I posted on my Facebook today, along with a lovely oil painting of Dr. King to mark the day. Here's the quote. Human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle, the tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. And if that doesn't sum up the man, his message, and the mission going forward, I don't know what does. And my only connection to his work, a direct connection to his work, was the last project that he was working on and called away from to support the sanitation workers in Memphis, the Poor People's Campaign, which he announced like back in December of 67. He announced it as a mass action in Washington, D.C. for the spring of 68, focusing and dramatizing the plight of poverty-stricken people of all races, creeds, and colors in America. And he was called away from that work to support the sanitation strikers. But I remember vividly the thing Resurrection City, which was on the Memorial and the Washington Monument next to the reflecting pool. Dozens and dozens of plywood shacks, lean-tos that were erected, where the people who had all come to Washington dwelled, okay, and it was called Resurrection City. And at night they would meet one another and share stories and strategize. And then during the daytime, they would go up to Capitol Hill and lobby senators and congressmen, letting them know the plight of poor people in America, okay? And then it all culminated in June of that year with a big rally and demonstration going from the monument to the Lincoln Memorial. And I'm sure 100,000 or more showed up for that. And of that number, I was a 14-year-old kid participating. And then there were speeches and music. And it was sort of like 5 years. It was sort of like the I Have a Dream, the demonstration for jobs and freedom of 63, 5 years later, with the focus being on poor people in America, no matter who they were, okay? So that was a proud moment for me, and not directed to Dr. King. I remember the following year, of the 3 taxi companies in Alexandria, which is my hometown in the suburbs of D.C., only one of the 3 taxi companies hired black drivers. And I remember an ongoing series of demonstrations to get black drivers hired by the other 2 cab companies that I participated in. And the companies finally relented after we shamed them basically into, well, we educated them, but part of that educational process was to shame them into doing right as opposed to continuing to discriminate. So, and I'll close with this. There were things about Dr. King that I didn't know, and I remember reading Stride Toward Freedom, which was his account of the Montgomery bus boycott, and another book, I guess it was the last book he wrote, called Why We Can't Wait. And I would recommend those to anyone, even today.
They remain relevant.
Yeah, oh, definitely, definitely. But I was coming back from somewhere, I believe Kansas City, going back to D.C. at some point, and I know I must have been flying Delta because we stopped in Atlanta for an hour and a half. And I remember browsing around the airport, waiting to board my connecting flight, and there was it was like a museum display highlighting Dr. King's life. And in one of the plexiglass cabinets was a life-size mannequin of King dressed in an actual set of clothes, a business suit, shirt and tie, that Dr. King wore.
You know, it's interesting you mention that because that as I was passing through Atlanta on the way to New York, they have that on. They have one of his suits on display as a sort of museum exhibit in Hartsfield International Airport. Right
It's
now.
probably the same thing. And 2 things struck me that I wasn't aware of. He was not a tall man, which for some reason, you picture him as a giant among men, which in a way he was, okay. So there was that. I didn't realize that he was only like about 5'6" or 5'7", and there I was, 6'4", marveling at that. And in the breast pocket of his suit coat was a pack of cigarettes. I never realized that he was a smoker.
Well, I think back then everybody was a smoker.
Well, yeah.
Except like my grandmother.
You wouldn't think back then that a Baptist minister would be a smoker.
Oh, back then, sure. Absolutely.
Well, I didn't, anyway.
Well, I guess I just saw a lot of Baptist ministers smoking. That they were one of the role models for the development of my habit.
Well, were you a hard-shell Southern Baptist?
Well, I was a Southern Baptist. The first, as I've said before, the first man I ever heard scream at anybody was not my father. It was a Southern Baptist minister in the pews at the church that I was raised in.
Yeah,
hollering his fool head off. I mean, he was frightening. It was a shock to, of course, he was hollering about how everybody was all immoral but that's true.
But anyway, those are my memories of Dr. King, and I don't know, I'm sure there's relevance. And I'm also kind of amazed that it's been 50 years, and his death was a turning point, and the reaction to it was a turning point. I mean, a radio reporter friend of mine in D.C. Somehow got up to the top of the Washington Monument as Washington burned. And from that vantage point, there's a bird's eye view of the south lawn of the White House, okay? And on the south lawn was a sandbag configuration with a freaking machine gun nest in it. because the burning was happening within 10 blocks of the White House. Nobody knew what was going to happen. I mean, and it wasn't just D.C. Every major American city experienced some form of looting or rioting or madness, which was totally out of keeping with what Dr. King's message and example was. But you can understand.
Well, and I feel kind of bad because, like, I've been negative in this commemoration, and all I can keep thinking is that I'm viewing this through the prism of my white male privilege. Okay, and it would be unfair to say that there has been no progress. I don't think anybody would make that argument and hope to be taken seriously. But it's a question of sufficiency, and in the current era of freaking backsliding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because that's what's most disturbing to me out of all this. Is that whatever progress we made, it seems that we are hell-bent on erasing it.
Well, and case in point, we had, in this country, for 8 years, we had a black president. Who would have thought that, okay? And it was something that could have and should have been greeted with universal acclaim and wonderment and rededication to really living out our founding principles, the good ones. But what did it turn out to be? A jumping off point for such division that a short time later we wound up with Donald J. Trump. And I don't know who the contributor was, but President Creamsicle nailed it.
That would be Ron and Raleigh.
I hadn't heard that one before, but that one, I'm going to write that one down and use it.
Well, I think about, and perhaps this is entirely unfair, but we had concepts of affirmative action. Those have largely been destroyed.
Yeah.
As a means of trying to equal or bring some effort to equalization of centuries of artificial inequality. And and that's one of the darlings of the right wing. Well, we can't have it. You know what? We can't be having quotas for African American or Hispanic children getting into college because that wouldn't be fair to the white people. It's not equality. That's not equality at all. It's not what that is. And you've got people like what's his name, Murray, penning that, his filthy little eugenic screeds. But then, lo and behold, affirmative action is alive and damn well on the pages of the New York Times and the Atlantic. I mean, there is no cogent, sane, rational argument for a venerable publication like the Atlantic to hire an unrepentant, unreconstructed misogynist and racist and homophobe and all the other things he is, like Kevin Williamson. But by God, his white skin got him some affirmative action that just won't freaking quit.
Yeah.
And he's got a job he does not deserve and is not qualified to fill. And he only got it because he's a loudmouth, pissant, right-wing, reactionary, racist, etc.
Well,
and the thing is, if when these troglodytes aren't given space in the national forum, they cry and they whine and they piss and they moan about how life's unfair to them. when the fact of the matter is, you would hope that there's just no room in this country for the bilious fucking filth that they're peddling.
Well, it's because...
I mean, go read. I'm sorry, I'm running over you, but
no,
you know,
no,
go read the body of work of Kevin Williamson, and then look at the heritage of the Atlantic, and tell me how you can explain his presence there as anything other than white privilege affirmative action in action.
Well, and another aspect of his presence there is it is an accommodation of the erroneous notion that there are two sides to every issue, two valid sides. And I say that when it comes to matters of justice and fairness and doing the right thing, as it were, there's only one side to that. Be about justice and fairness and doing the right thing. And anything contrary to that is a false argument. Our old buddy Alex Jones talks about false flags and propaganda. Well, that's an example of it. And his presence at the Atlantic is an accommodation after, and we should know better by this point, that benefits nobody. Now you're getting me pissed off. But
maybe that's kind of my job.
And I didn't mean to say that
if you're not pissed off, you're not paying attention, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I've got a button that says that, and I won't wear it because I'm so pissed off it only gets me started, But anyway, well, I said I wasn't going to go on, but I went on. So
that's okay. You went on with a purpose.
Well, I it's just that there have been so many missed opportunities in the last 50 years. What year was the Bakke case, the so-called reverse discrimination case?
Oh, I can't off the top of my head. But
it was the 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, that ties into what you've been saying for many, many, many moons. The era of Reagan has fucked this country up to a fare-thee-well.
And that, yes, and that is the thing that we cannot walk away from or we cannot forget. And it seems to get a little tougher every day. And there will, assuming that the planet isn't reduced to a smoking cinder between now and January 20th, 2025, when Ivanka becomes president.
I wish you'd stop saying that, because there is a thing called speaking shit into reality. And that's one reality I would just assume.
Do you have any idea how much money I win if that happens?
Oh, I know. And you could buy the damn Gulfstream jet.
I'm kidding, of course, but
I know,
but no, there's this question that we're gonna survive if okay, I'm trying really hard to put on my little gingham Rebecca of Sunnybrook farm dress. We're going to survive this, but what we're going to find out is that the Republican Party is still there, and lo and behold, all of this wasn't just because of Trump.
Well, no, because let's not forget the through line. Barry Goldwater begat Reagan, and Reagan and the mindset that surrounded him has brought us Trump, and all the Trump minions. Let's not forget them, and all the right, ultra right wing media, and internet, and talk radio. Let's not forget that. And this is what I mean. It's not so much that people have missed opportunities, I guess. Maybe it's that our attention has been diverted, and reality has been skewed to the point of unrecognizability. Because if you live in a world where you take the gospel whole hog that's uttered by these fools, it's no wonder things are as messed up as they are, and that Dr. King's dream has not been even remotely realized.
Okay. Here's one of those little moments in time.
Yeah.
It was 4 years after the assassination of Dr. King that future Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell authored the Powell Memo in 1972.
Mm-hmm.
And in that Powell Memo, he set forth the means by which the thinking of this country would be completely driven into retrograde motion with the rise of the Heritages and the Catos and the CEIs and the AEIs and all of these godforsaken industry-funded nightmare white-wing think tanks. Just to put a little and you know, that wasn't by accident. That was a response to the way that the culture that was going, which was contrary to the wishes of the white wing in this country, of which Lewis Powell was goddamned well a part. And just to put a little bow on the thing that began the program, sort of, that story out of Florida Atlantic University, Professor DeRosa, who believes that black supremacy brought on slavery, and I think I know what he's talking about. I don't want to go into it, and doesn't care what people think about his association with white supremacist organizations. Well, there was one little factor that I didn't mention, and it's kind of a perfect ending to the program based on the way that the discussion has gone, Scott. And that's this. Professor DeRosa is a professor at Florida Atlantic University because Chuck and Dave, the Koch brothers, gave money that allowed him to be a professor at Florida Atlantic University.
Well, there you go.
See how it works?
Earlier, when you were talking about it, I said, well, now I know I've never heard of this school, okay? And I envisioned one of those outfits where the come-on that gets people in the door as students, so-called, includes a legend somewhere on it in tiny print, do not mail matches. Okay? I'm thinking this is like barely a step up.
It's a huge school.
Really?
Yeah.
Jesus.
I think it's kind of a commuter campus, but it's got 20,000 students, something like that.
Well, who are they turning out into the world with professors like that?
Well, I mean, don't judge the student body on one racist, because he was being challenged by the student body for being a racist. That's
good. But generally speaking, it's not incorrect with some of these so-called schools to be packed and jammed with professors of that ilk.
Well, and sure, especially in the economics department, and that goes back to what the James A. Buchanan or whatever that you brought up the other night in the book Democracy in Chains, that Gary referenced in an email last night. And the fact of the matter is, you can't swing a sofa cushion without hitting some white winger broadcaster, pundit, whatever. George Soros controls the world, and he's trying to he wants to eat little Christian fetuses, and he's funding everybody, and he's the bête noire of the right wing. And yet, if you look around, you can't find anybody who's getting a check from George Soros.
Well,
on the other hand, however, there are economics departments in colleges and universities all over this country that are awash in libertarian, toxic Koch brothers money, preaching that snake oil religion that isn't even economics.
Bingo.
And we got to get out of here, Scott.
Okay, I'll close on this. If they are so muzzled, how is it there are so goddamn many of them spreading their
right? If they're so muzzled, why do we keep hearing so fucking much from them?
There you go. That's a good note to close on.
We're doing a piss poor job of the muzzling people.
Yeah. All right, Bob.
All right, later on, Scott.
Stay sane and ever upward and forward.
For the love of God, open up that bird seed, would you?
All right, I will. Punky's eyeing me nervously.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't make him use his little beak to do it. That's cruel.
No, I'll unscrew the top of the jar and pull back the safety seal.
All right. We're trusting you on this. Squidbillies. Later, Scott.
Yes, later.
And it is time to get out of here. It's 8 p.m. I got to retool and reboot for the Malloy campfire. I guess we're going to close the program with a fundraising deficit this evening of $496. Hey, it'll be $796 tomorrow. Somewhere along the way, it would be nice to take a bite out of that. But if we just have to fall short by a week in April, we just have to fall short by a week in April. But anyway, anything that takes that down is a tremendous help. I encourage you. Take a long look at that $10 subscription. It's not like you're not buying access because you already get it. A lot of people, we give it away for free. But it's a question of just trying to keep this all on the air. I wish there was some other way to do this than by talking about it like this. But really, less than half the cost of a McDonald's hamburger, or the cost of half a McDonald's hamburger if you could buy one if you wanted one, for hours and hours and hours and hours of independent broadcasting every month. Seems like a bargain. Anyway, thanks, everybody. Thanks to all of you who share your precious finite time in keeping the program going. Thank you to all of you who keep the program going. Thank you to our all-volunteer staff. Thanks this evening to pinch hit midweek utility chat room moderator Steve from Georgistan, all-around great guy. Thank you very kindly, Steve. Thank you to our news ninjas. Thanks, John Fox in Australia. Thank you, Brother Deacon Asa, headon.live. Thanks, Ben Birch, whiterosesociety.org. Thanks to the hardest working, bravest people I know, the men and women of Coal River Mountain Watch, crmw.net. Oh, one last correction. Bakke, Marty reminds me. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. The Bakke case was in the 1970s. 1978, to be exact. Which still, in its own way, is part of the rise of Reagan because of the ideology that propelled him forward. And always, 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 Gina, it's all for you. I'll catch you in about an hour, I hope. Till then, later.